The curse of DEI runs very, very deep through both our public and private sectors, as I found out myself with the banking industry last year. But it's where it's gone into the military that I've often scratched my head. In America, things have turned around very quickly and very, very dramatically indeed. And President Trump made this clear absolutely from the start. And he appointed Pete Hegseth. And I went to an event when I was over there for the inauguration and heard him speak. I thought what he said was incredible. Have a look at him on Fox News just yesterday.
What's happening with DEI? How's that going at the Defense Department?
Well, DEI is not going well at the Defense Department because it's dead. We will, as the president said in his inaugural, we will be merit-based and colorblind, and that is the case at the Defense Department. DEI is going to be ripped out root and branch because we want everyone treated equally with high standards and held accountable with warfighting, lethality, and readiness front and center. We don't have time for emphasizing differences. Jesse, one of the dumbest phrases in military history is our diversity is our strength. Our diversity is not our strength. Our unity and our shared purpose is our strength.
And that backs up President Trump, who says we are committed to meritocracy and to the elimination of race-based and sex-based discrimination. And Hegseth goes on to say that we want our forces to be lethal killers. He makes the point, we will only use them as a last resort. The war is a last resort. But it's pretty clear the direction that America's going in now under this administration. Oh dear. Let's contrast that with the Royal Navy, once the greatest pride of our nation. Yesterday, a picture, a tweet went out from the Royal Navy Diversity Network. No, I'm really not making this picture up. There it is on the screens in front of you. And the accompanying text says, as chair of the Royal Navy Race Diversity Network, it gives me great pleasure to announce that the existing Royal Navy cultural mess dress policy has just been updated to include wider forms of British cultural identity. I can't just for a moment picture the painted hall. And there it is at Greenwich. It's one of the architectural masterpieces designed by Christopher Wren. And in that great room sat and dined Lord Nelson, Admiral Jackie Fisher, some of the most incredible people in British history. And now you can turn up pretty much wearing what you like for a mess dinner. It sums up where we have gone wrong. I'm joined, I'm very pleased to say, in the studio by a friend of mine, Rear Admiral Mike Hewitt, retired US Navy officer. How bad had the woke DEI stuff got in the American military?
It got horribly bad, and we got out of lethality. And we spent so much time on non-merit-based activities, such as DEI and other policies, that we had two problems. One, tooth to tail. Our tooth was thin, our tail was large, which is all these things we were spending our time on. Secondly, we couldn't recruit anybody because men and women that want to serve in the military want to serve to a higher standard and a standard that has merit base to it. And this was the problem with DEI. It diluted our fighting force, and I can't thank the president enough for putting Pete Hegseth in as our secretary, because the first thing the young men and women will respect is that he had dirt on his boots. He's fought in combat.
Yes.
He's lost men and women under his charge. So if you're a father and a mother and you're going to have your child, your young man and woman serve in the military, I certainly am more comfortable serving under Pete Hegseth.
I have heard that recruitment is up already.
Yes, it is.
But when this stuff's put upon them, see, the question that I ask myself, and we'll come in a minute to our British political guests and ask ourselves about the Royal Navy. The question I've always asked, if you're running the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, and government says this is what you've got to do, don't you fight back? I mean, didn't the American military chiefs fight back?
You know what's interesting about the military? When I started serving in 1985 under Ronald Reagan, women couldn't serve in combat. But we're the most inclusive organization on the planet, if you meet the standard. And I was part of the group that brought women into combat. And you know what? They made us a better fighting force. But they'll be the first to tell you, I don't want a different standard. I want to meet the standard that's required for lethality. And so we are the most inclusive organization on the planet. But when you start to dilute the standard, to me, cultural mess dress makes no sense. Mess dress makes all the sense in the world.
I'm going to come back to you in a minute on Diego Garcia, so don't go away. It's hard to believe some of this stuff, isn't it?
It is. It is. I've never served in the armed forces, but I have campaigned with ex-soldiers whose regiment was being disbanded. And boy, were they proud of their cap badges and their uniforms. And they saw it as a unifying factor. And I imagine, well, I've been on warships, that eating in the mess in the same uniform is a unifying thing. You want to emphasise that we're all together. One of the great things I imagine about being in the armed services, which we hope we don't have to use, is that the people of junior ranks have to be in the same place as senior ranks, and they have to be unified. And they have to trust each other. The lower ranks have to trust the officers will make the right decisions, and the officers have to trust that the people will follow them. And that unity is helped by wearing
unity of purpose rather than diversity. Yeah, I mean, Tom, one of the problems here is all this stuff advanced so much in the last 14 years.
Well, I think that, what is right operationally has always got to be first, second and third.
But it wasn't with that photograph, was it?
But I also find that the sort of sentiment that's been expressed by the US Secretary of State around merit and an approach to this that's based on merit very refreshing. I remember when the RAF a few years ago got into a lot of bother when it came to discriminating against white male recruits.
Against white males.
And Ben Wallace very firmly came out and called that out. He was right to do so.
Yeah.
They weren't recruiting any. They weren't recruiting
exactly, and that's just not acceptable. And, I agree a lot, actually, with what Graham has said there.
I cannot let a retired US Navy Rear Admiral go without asking this question. Diego Garcia, part of the Chagos Islands, we've had sovereignty over it. I think it's one of the big things we give to America, is the ability to use that as a military base. How important is it from a US naval perspective?
It is one of the most strategic bases we have around the world. If you look at where it is geographically, without that base, we have no ability to reach deep into enemy territory in many AORs. The fact is the Chinese, if they get access to that base, will completely change our ability to serve as a blue water navy and also a global presence forward. It is the key base for us to reach into the Middle East and to reach into the Indian Ocean. And it is frightening to me that we may lose access to that base.
Do you think the Trump administration will tell the British government in no uncertain terms?
I imagine they already have.
I think that may well be right,
yes.
Which may well be why it hasn't happened. Mike, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
At GB News, we believe in the power of free speech. We're not afraid to ask the tough questions, challenge the status quo, and give you a voice. While others silence dissent, we champion the truth. By becoming a GB News member, you're not just supporting free speech, you're defending it. Please consider supporting us today. Together, we'll hold the powerful to account and make sure that your voice is always heard. Simply go to gbnews.com/support and stand with us for what matters most.